Why is it so difficult to do extensive reading in Taiwan? Theoretically, extensive reading works for L1 and L2 contests. If we use Google Scholar and type the keyword extensive reading, we can find more than 47,000 results of extensive reading in Google Scholar. And the findings generally indicate positive learning outcomes from extensive reading. But in reality, we do not see a lot of teachers or students use extensive reading to teach or learn English in Taiwan. And what are the factors that hinder their use or adoption of extensive reading? So in this presentation, I'm going to focus on factors that hinder extensive reading in Taiwan. The first one is no time for students to read extensively. Second is no books available for them to read. Third, too many unknown words in extensive reading materials. Lack of support from parents or schools. Lack of teaching skills. Lack of motivated readers. Don't know how to measure extensive reading achievement, and lack of passion or courage. Now let's look at the first factor, no time to do extensive reading. Some people in Taiwan believe that students don't have time to do extensive reading in English at home because there are always a lot of assignments or homework or tests for them to prepare. But do students in Taiwan need to find time to study in cram schools or to find time to work on test preparation materials? The answer may be no, because those things are important for most students. So I think it's not about time availability. It's about the priority you have. What is valued the most in most students, teachers, and parents' mind. So in Taiwan, a lot of people believe that test score is much more important than language proficiency development, because test score will have huge influence on what scores you will enter and maybe will lead to your salary standard. And language proficiency development is important, but because it's not that straightforward or explicit, so it's a little bit vague, so hard to measure. So I think most people will focus on the test score instead of the actual comprehensive, holistic development of language skills. Since there are hundreds, thousands of research findings indicate the positive effects of extensive reading, so I think not only find time, it's important for us to make time to make extensive reading possible in most language learners' learning experience. And there's a saying that time is like the water in the sponge. If you are willing to squeeze the water out, you can always make some water. So I think the same thing applies to finding time or making time to make extensive reading happen. Now I'm going to show you my experience of making time to help my kids to do extensive reading on a regular basis. Okay, when my son was an elementary school kid, I had to drive him to school. Okay, so the trip is about 12 minutes a day. And what we did is I play Magic Tree House audio in my car on our way to school. So 5 days a week. So there was 1 hour of listening to audiobook. And with 1 year, 54 hours total, we can finish a 50 Magic Tree House series. Okay, so actually by spending only 12 minutes a day, you can accumulate a lot of learning experience just in a car. So, and 50 books of Magic Tree House sounds quite a lot, but if you spread those learning into smaller chunks, and you can really accomplish a lot. Here's another example. We can squeeze time out of our daily routine to listen to audiobook. And listening to audiobook is also very helpful to develop your reading skills and also listening and vocabulary skills. So for example, in the morning, when you have breakfast or you commute to schools or to work, you can listen to audiobook. And when you are having lunch, you can listen to audiobook. And when you are taking a shower or brush your teeth, you can also listen to audiobook. And I skip dinner because I think to make it more flexible. Okay, so with these 3 sessions of listening to audiobook, you get 10 minutes in the morning, 30 minutes for lunch, and 20 minutes at night. And its total hour is 1 hour a day. So with 355 hours a year, actually it equals to 1.5 months a year. For learning, spending 8 hours a day, it equals to 1.5 months of time. So just by making reading or listening to audiobook as part of your daily routine, actually you can squeeze out such a huge amount of learning time. So when it comes to extensive reading, what to read or how to read, it may not be that important, because what matters most is how much do you really want to do it. So to sum up the first factor, don't have time to do extensive reading? No, you can always make time to make it happen. The next problem is about notebooks for extensive reading. Students in Taiwan usually carry very heavy backpack to school, and they also have to buy a variety of different test preparation materials in order to help them to ace in the test. And they also have different subjects test papers. So the parents in Taiwan do spend money on purchasing education related materials, but most of them are test related. Some elementary or high school will require students to read magazines that is for English learners, and they also will include the materials into the test, and some teachers even teach the articles in the magazine. And fewer students in Taiwan use authentic stories or novels as their external or extensive reading materials. And so most students are exposed to magazines for EFL learning purpose, and stories are rarely used. But it's very obvious that most students will find stories to be more interesting. Actually, there are a lot of different kinds of story series that are interesting and should be able to arouse students' interest and motivation to read extensively. And these are some more examples. If students' exposure to reading is only limited to textbook or learners magazine, it would be very difficult for them to develop motivation to read extensively. And actually, there are so many interesting, um, authentic English stories available for teachers and students to purchase on the internet or bookstore. Research finding has shown that using audiobook has been very effective in assisting students' extensive reading skill development and vocabulary acquisition. And so there are a lot of audiobook available in Taiwan, and for example, the Magic Tree House series have a package include book and CD, and for each book and CD, it costs less than $200. So as a teacher, you can organize a class club or a class collection of interesting book series so students can share and reduce the cost. Another way is to access to reading A to Z, an online reading websites. And the website has included thousands of graded readers, and the annual fee is for one class is about $4,000. So if you divide the cost into like 30 students, it costs a student less than $200 per year, but they can have basically unlimited exposure and access to a variety of different reading materials. And the last one is YouTube. There are a lot of audiobooks available. There are a number of audiobooks available on internet for children. For example, Curious George is a very famous, popular one. Students can read and listen to the audiobook at the same time. So to sum up, don't have books actually is not a problem. The solution is very easy. Teacher can organize a class library and collect books for students to read, and they share the cost. And also ebooks is another option, free of charge. The next issue is about too many unknown words in extensive reading. Usually for EFL students, they have limited vocabulary size. So when it comes to extensive reading, it can become very frustrating for a lot of students because there are so many unknown words. And there are three solutions to the problem. The first one is to use graded readers so students can read the books of their level. And the second is use audiobooks. Research findings have shown that using audiobooks is much more effective than reading the text alone, because the audio input will allow students to remember the unknown words much more easily. The third one is to allow students free choice of books. When students have the choice to choose the book they like, they are more likely to have the motivation to look up unknown words in the dictionary or guessing words meaning from the context. Motivation itself can solve a lot of problems in learning. Another issue is about forgetting things. We all forget things, and we all forget the words that we just learned. So fortunately, extensive reading can solve the problems because as research finding shows that our memory on the learned thing will decay gradually. But for extensive reading, because the number of exposure of words is much bigger than intensive reading. such as reading only in the articles in the textbook. So if students have the habit of spending, for example, 30 minutes on extensive reading, actually the exposure will allow them to accumulate the learned word. So they will pick up the words at a high speed because they will meet the words, they will review the words, they will get exposure to the words much more often than what we do in intensive reading. Another issue is about individual differences in the number of exposures to acquire a word. People different in their IQ, and different IQ tend to have different requirement of exposures. But the good thing about extensive reading is that no matter your IQ is on the top, for example, about 120, you may need 20 times of exposure. And if you are just an average learner, you may need 35 times of exposure. But if you read extensively, it will be very easy for students, regardless of their IQ, to meet the words, to reach the required exposure times very fast. Because when they read extensively, all the words will come to them. They will incidentally review the words in their extensive reading. One way to reduce the burden of too many unknown words in story is to have students as a class to look up unknown words in the dictionary together, and they put the unknown word list onto some platforms such as Quizlet. So for example, if the story has 200 pages and you have 20 students in the class, and you can assign each student to read 10 different pages and ask them to skim through the reading and find out all the unknown words and use dictionary to find the meaning and upload the word list onto Quizlet. So by working together, and students help each other to collectively compile the word list for any story you assign for the class. This is a very effective way. Usually you can spend just 30 minutes of class time to compile a complete list of the unknown words in the story. This is an example of how a group of students at NCTU look up the unknown words in lunch money together. So each student was responsible for one book chapter, and together they spent about 30 minutes and finish looking up the whole books, about 200 pages. So the problem about too many unknown words, actually the solution is quite easy. Choose graded readers and have students do extensive reading, and it will take care of everything automatically. The fourth issue about extensive reading is lack of support from parents and schools. If you ask, how can we make extensive reading happen? The answer is quite easy, just do it. But it's not as easy as it sounds like, because as a teacher, if you want to promote extensive reading in your class, it's very likely that you will face a lot of hesitation or doubt from the parents. And the best timing to share your vision and the dream with the parents is during the parent-teacher conferences. And in addition to that, uh, some communication through other channels are also very important because that allow teachers to communicate with the parents on a more frequent basis. Here I'm going to show how teachers of my kid try very hard to communicate with the parents about his vision and dream. For example, the first letter, the highlighted part. Storm days inside are a wonderful time to read, maybe even reading out loud with your child. Harkening back to the days of old when families would gather inside and share a story. I will be starting a new book with my children called A Sneaker of Magic. The next letter is about collecting donation from the parents. It goes, if you want to buy your student a book for the holidays, here is a link to books that I do not have in the classroom library, which look interesting. And the teacher posts a wish list on Amazon.com and posts some books that he would like to collect in the library. So the parents will buy the books and send to the school. The next message. I have been so impressed by the students in my class this year and last year. Empathetic, powerful leaders who can make a difference in this world. You are helping to raise the next generation and they will make our society a better place. So a message full of encouragement for the parents. So it's kind of trying to educate the parents and empower the parents. The next message is welcome to the second semester. The first semester was one of my most enjoyable in teaching, and I'm deeply grateful for the children you are raising. Again, very encouraging. The next message. Thanks for raising awesome kids. Every day I look forward to coming in to school and teaching them. We get so much done and it's so much fun. Next, the fourth quarter is off to a great start. Please remind your students that just like a basketball game, the fourth quarter is the most important quarter. Finishing strong will be the best way for them to have an excellent education. And the final note, reading. Reading for 7 hours every week at home is their responsibility. State testing for language arts is next week. My personal view is that testing is a skill students need to develop, so I take this opportunity seriously. The test is not perfect, but resilience is a skill that the students can use to their benefit throughout life. Please make sure they sleep well and eat a healthy breakfast. At home, you will need to check their cobra as they read. Again, about reading. Please make sure they are reading each evening at home. Okay, the teachers keep reminding the parents to check on their kids. And the next is about test score. The teacher say, having said that, I would caution you to make sure you do not put very much emphasis on the scores. This test is still under development, and I'm hopeful that the test will improve with time. There will be increased clarity about how they are scored, and students will get used to the computerized process. And again, please make sure your student reads. Next is about field trip announcement. What a joy it continues to be in the classroom with your students. And this is the last weekend for reading. Please make sure your students is completing a book this weekend. And it takes a village to raise a child. So as a teacher, you have to work with the parents and communicate and invite the parents' engagement or involvement in the extensive reading. And constant communication can be a very powerful way of changing the parents' perception about extensive reading or even test scores. People only see what they are prepared to see. So the question here is, are you ready? Are you prepared to embark in the journey of encouraging students to read extensively? So to sum up, parents' resistance, the solution is communication, constant and endless communication with the parents. The next issue is lack of teaching skills. How to guide and encourage students to do extensive reading in English. According to Stephen Krashen, one positive reading experience can make you a good reader. So what a teacher needs to focus on is to create a positive reading experience for the students. And how to do that? I think help students find appropriate, interesting reading materials. And that will be a very important start of making positive reading experience happen. And when students become a good reader, a lot of learnings, a lot of vocabulary, grammar, comprehension will come naturally, automatically. Question also mentioned that if you are giving reward to something that is already pleasant, you are telling people it is not pleasant. So try not to encourage students to read by giving them rewards, such as give them scores or give them some bonus credit for their effort to read, because reading itself should be pleasant and enjoyable, and the teacher need to be clear about that part. The next thing is about questions idea for extensive reading, notebooks report, and no spelling and grammar drills because they all come from reading. So if students have to write a report to prepare for the spelling test or grammar drills, then it basically ruins the whole thing about extensive reading. That is, there's no longer fun to read because there are pressure and tests or reports coming after the reading. So it's like if you invite your student to watch a movie, but you tell them that after watching the movie, they have to write a report about the movie, or you will test them on the vocabulary or grammar usage in the movies. How fun it could be to watch the movie. So the idea is no intervention of students' extensive reading. Now I would like to use a metaphor of food to describe language learning and teaching. If you provide students with authentic material, it's like introducing them to the authentic, rich components of the language uses, and it can be very effective. But if you only teach vocabulary list or grammar, it's like extracting the nutrients from original food to vitamin. And so if you have students read the book that they are interested in, you are more likely to have happy faces on the students, and they will enjoy doing what they are doing and can acquire a lot of language knowledge through the reading itself. But if you always spoon feed students with all kinds of vitamins, it's very likely that you will have students like this, not very interested in, and maybe a lot of resistance from your teaching. So when it comes to extensive reading, the easy way is the best way. And it's like for healthy eating, we should eat whole food instead of processed food. The next topic is lack of motivated learners. Let me share my own story and experience of helping my son to be an extensive reader. My son loves sports, and ever since he was a little boy, he showed no interest in reading or anything about books. And whenever I bring him to bookstore, he will do anything but read. And like most parents and students, the loading in school increased, and until he was a fourth grader, we still couldn't find time for him to read in English or in Chinese, actually. But I also realized one important thing. The reading ability should be equivalent to your age. Otherwise, it will be very difficult for children to be motivated to read. And so when he was a fourth grader, I finally decide to make a change. Otherwise, it will be too late. So from that time, I decided to uh, allocate 30 minutes a day for him to read. And that include 15 minutes of Chinese reading and 15 minutes in English reading. And at that time, we use audiobook as a reading source. The first thing a teacher or a parent need to do is to create an inviting environment. To make reading makes the books more inviting to the children. So I found that the key point is to make the book cover, the beautiful book cover, up front. So these are all examples. So I try to apply what I found on internet to what in my living room. So we used to have a piano, but my son didn't enjoy learning playing piano. So I decided to make the piano as a bookshelf. So I display a lot of Chinese books, cover front. Okay, and later, about 6 months later, the display also include English books, because at that time he has gained some ability to read in simple English stories. And so since even though we only have like 15 minutes a day reading in English, but we do it on a regular basis. So eventually he finished most of the Magic Tree House series. My son's motivation to reading is moderate, and until he found his loved one, the warriors. And it really boosts his motivation to read, because the story is so excited, and he really enjoyed reading all the series of warriors, both in Chinese and English. There's a theory about 21 days. That means in order to develop a habit, you have to do things for 21 days, non-stop. And until then, you will get used to it and develop the habit of doing it. And I think it applied to extensive reading in both Chinese and English. This photo demonstrates how my son turned out to be a passionate reader. It was taken the night before I took him to a 2-day trip, and I saw him put so many books in his backpack. So I told him that, oh, we are going to travel, so we won't have time for you to read, so you don't have to bring so many books. But my son insisted that he had to um, bring all these books with him, and he didn't care about the weight on the backpack. So even though he didn't end up finishing all the books, but he did try to find time to read the books on the train. And when we were riding bicycles, I was a sole rider, so he was up front, and then he will read the books when he was waiting for his slow mom. And before we eat, he insisted that he want to finish uh, the part of the reading, and that it really impressed me. So he read whenever he have time, and when we were in the park, he would find a place to read. And also, when I was shopping, he will sit at the corner and read his books. And so I think part of the reason for his reading development is because of his teachers in United States encourage the whole class to read at least 1 hour a day, and that really helps a lot for students to develop a habit. As I mentioned earlier, his homeroom teacher, English teacher, encouraged the whole class to read 1 hour a day. And so after a few months, I think 4 months in school, he wrote in his diary that he has finished 24 uh, books of warriors. And he said that a book is about 300 pages. So he calculated that he has read over 7,000 pages. And yeah, and he mentioned that this is the last warrior he was reading, and he did that when he was in the restaurant. This is a photo taken when he was in United States, and it was before winter break. They had a 17 days winter break, and he borrowed 6 books from the library, and he promised that he would like to read all of them. And actually, he finished 3 books, which has over 500 pages. One night before he went to bed, we were about to move back to Taiwan, and I asked him, when you go back to Taiwan, will you continue reading 30 minutes a day? I didn't dare to say 1 hour, because in Taiwan, I think it's impossible to spend 1 hour reading. And my son correct me, say, oh, I want to read 1 hour a day. That was his idea. This is how a classroom library can be like. And it is important to notice that you don't have to do it by yourself. Actually, involving parents is the key to success. How much is enough for extensive reading? According to Nation, a book weekly or in 2 weeks' time is sufficient. And Maruyama mentioned that 5 graded readers in 1 semester should be enough. Actually, it depends on the age, the proficiency level of students, but no matter what, I think habit of doing extensive reading is the key. So for education, a lot of time we spoon feed our students, okay? And sometimes you will find students who have strong resistance to your feeding. And while our purpose of education should be helping students to help themselves, help them to be motivated so that they have the desire to learn. So don't accept the default. Seek out an option that will be better for students. The next one is don't know how to measure outcomes of extensive reading. Can extensive readers ace the big test in Taiwan? I think that's a key issue uh, for a lot of parents, students, and teachers. Does it work under the constraint, under the test culture in Taiwan? Over the past few years, I have interviewed several junior high and senior high school teachers and asked them to compare the differences between students learning from traditional grammar vocabulary approach versus students learning from extensive reading. And all of them told me that for students using extensive reading approach, their performance may not be very well compared with those traditional grammar vocabulary driven approach students. And because those extensive readers tend to focus on major uh, idea, so and a lot of tests in school are too detail driven. So those students with extensive reading background may not perform extremely well. But for the bigger tests, such as college entrance examination or high school entrance examination, those extensive readers will outperform other students. And to take my son for example, when he was in junior high school, his English test performance is above average, but never be the top in the school or in the class. But to my surprise, and also to his surprise, actually for the high school entrance examination, he got A++, which is the highest ranking. And actually, what he got is 100%. He didn't make any mistake on the test. So that really strengthened my beliefs about how extensive readers can not only enrich his or her life, but also won't sacrifice their performance on the subject. The next part is about lack of courage. Being different from others can be very intimidating or insecure. But if you really think that extensive reading is the key to the holistic development of learners' language skills, I'm going to encourage you to teach big. And here are three quotations that might help you to strengthen your courage. The first is thinking big begins with believing big. The dream always comes before the success. Next, the size of your success is only limited by the size of your thinking. So if you believe that extensive reading can work in Taiwan, it will work in Taiwan, at least in your classroom. Faith can move mountains. So, according to Walt Disney, it's kind of fun to do the impossible. And we know that there are a lot of obstacles to implement extensive reading in Taiwan, but it may be fun to do the impossible. So think outside the box can be fun. It can be risky, but I think it will make your journey of being a language teacher more meaningful and more rewarding in the long run. So teach outside the textbook, outside the culture limitations. A teacher's role can be changed from a stage on the stage to a guide on the side. A question you can ask yourself is, what kind of teacher do I want to be? A teacher of vitamin, a teacher of whole food, or a teacher who can strike a balance between vitamin and whole food. Thank you.